Hey guys, you're watching Concept, and in this tutorial we will focus on changing color of our tiles and creating our background and changing it with the color of the tiles. This will be the last part of our tutorial for this tag game. So let's get started. First, in our content we will create a new folder which will be called materials, and we will create new material. So material, okay, this will be base matte. Okay, in our material we will set base color to be param vector parameter, and we will call it base color. Remember this name, base color, because we will change that parameter. And we will also set for specular, we will say constant, and roughness also constant, which will be equal to 1, and we will save that. Okay, when it's saved we can say we can close this and we can create instance. So it will be instance of that. With instance we can easily change value of that base color. So for example we can change it to be something like yellow or green, doesn't matter. Now we'll go back to blueprint. We will work with HSV because it's much more simpler. Unreal usually works with RGB, but we have ways to convert it to RGB. Okay, so in our blueprint folder, in our stack spawner, we'll create some variables. We'll create 3 variables, and that will actually be HSV. You can create it as a vector 3, but I like it this way more. So H, it will be float, okay, S, float, and V, float. Okay, for our H, our starting color will be 165, and for our saturation it will be 0.8. By testing I found that it is the best for working with it, but you can also change it whatever you like. Let's compile and save. Okay, for our first function we'll create get color, which will give us RGB color from our HSV. So in that case RGB, HSV to RGB. Okay, so we will feed it with H, S, S, and V. Okay, so in this case we will split this, and we will say for return type it will be output vector, so it is a vector of RGB color. Okay, and we will split this, feed it with RGB. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this function. Let's compile and save. Now before we go into setting our colors, we will need to explain some things. So we have HSV. H is actually color, so you can see red, blue, yellow, doesn't matter. S is how saturated it is, so if it is a 1 then it's a full, it is a 0 then it's like gray, and V is how dark it is a value. So as we know that, we will create a new function which will be set color. Let's go back into our stack spawner. Okay, let's create that function. So we will say function set color. First we will create sequence. Okay, so in our sequence we will change our H for every cycle. We will say set H to plus float plus float, so previous value of H, okay, plus 3. That will be our first cycle. And we will say branch, and it will, in that cycle, V will change. V is 0 by default, so we will say that if V is greater than 0.8, then it will do something. But if it is not greater than 0.8, you will change also not only h but also v. So we will say v set, okay, and we will say plus, so v plus 0.05. So every cycle it will change h but also v until it hits 0.8, and if it hits 0.8 we will say to change s, so our saturation, it became bright enough, so we will say minus, because s is by default 0.8, and we will say then go change its grayness, let it become more gray. So we will say something like 0.02, and we will also add branch, and if this s is less than 0.7, because we don't want it to be much gray, it's already very light, so in this case it will become very white. So when it hits that ceiling, and it already hit this ceiling, we will say just change s to its original, so 0.8, and change v, we can set it to, for example, 0.2, because we don't want to start with much dark color, even if I set it already to be 0, but 0.2 is fine. And set h to some random color, so we will say random float in range, yeah, so from 0 to 389, because this is the first color and this is the last color. You can also make some list of colors if you don't want to include some, for example, brownish colors. But in this case, it will also include, and maybe it will look a bit weird. So you can say some values, put it in an array. So choose randomly from array. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really simple algorithm. We will also say output to be vector, and we will say RGB color. So it's the same for get color. I mean, I will use that get color, and that will be the second sequence, and it will return us this will actually have same return as get color, because we will need it also. And yeah, that's pretty much it for color. So let's get back to our event graph, and we will say let's get to our spawning. So when we spawn it, we will need something from this, and that is, what is it called? Tile. It's called static mesh. Okay, so static mesh gets, not local bounds, just static mesh. Okay, so get static mesh, and we will change, so we'll see set vector parameter value on material. So as you can remember, our parameter was called base color in our materials, if you can remember, so base color. Okay, so in this case we will say set color, and it sets color, and after it sets color it will set material to be that of that color. Okay, let's compile and save, and before we do that we need to do something with our tile, and that is to go here and say material instance. Let's compile and save, and let's hit play. Something's not right. Oh yeah, this is not connected. Okay, let's get back to our stack spawner, and we will go here where we spawn our tiles. So we will break this, and we will say current tile, get that current tile, static mesh, local bounds, not local bounds, but get static mesh. Okay, so we will say set color. Okay, it sets new color, and we will say vector. So we will say set vector, the same thing we did before. So base color. Okay, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Even we could have add this to this set color and put input of tile, so reference to a tile, and after that we could have made it as one function and just feed it with whatever it needs, or static mesh. We can say input as static mesh, but doesn't matter really right now. Just so you know, if you work your, just take a look at your functions to be fully included all stuffs, not to do something like this. And if we go back to our game, we'll say play, and you will see every tile it changes color or saturation, doesn't matter. And now it's changed fully. Now we need to make that remainder color, so we will need a variable current color, and we will say vector. Okay, so it needs to be the same color. That remainder will be the same as the one we spawned. So in this case, before we do this, we could set something like this. So set that current color, and after that change that parameter. Okay, so we have that current color. Now we have to change also remainder to be the same as that spawn. So in this case we will go back to get intersect, no, spawn. So spawn remainder left and spawn remainder right. In this case we will say static mesh. So same thing all over again. So get static mesh, not vector parameter value. Okay, and we will say to be same as current color, so of a current tile. We could just take color from a tile, but this is more convenient. Okay, so we will copy this, and we will spawner right, spawner left. Okay, so in this case, copy paste it, do the same thing, and yeah, let's try this out. Something's on. Oh yeah, it doesn't work because we didn't assign this to be to our base instance. Okay, compile, save, and now all will work just fine. Except it doesn't change color. Okay, let's see what's going on. To our event graph, I think something's okay. Current color. Okay, current color. Oh yeah, base color. Okay, so spawn right, also base color. Okay, let's compile and save, and now will all work just fine. Yeah, it's all working fine. So yeah, now we'll create a background, and we will change color of a background. Now let's create our background. We'll go to stack spawner and go to camera, add component plane. That plane will actually be on -510, rotation 10, -90, and -160. I think that is good, not really. Oh yeah, this will be 700. Okay, and this will be 160. I think that was good, yeah. So we will also set scale to 18, 18, and 18. And I think this is actually 1 because it's a plane. Okay, so we will compile and save. And now let's create that material. So we go to materials, we will use this base. So duplicate, and we will call it gradient background. Okay. So we will use darken, blend darken, and we will use gradient linear text coordinates, texture coordinates. Okay, so we will use this, and for texture coordinates we will say vtaling 0.5. Okay, so let's see what we got. Oh yeah, and we will change this to something reddish. Let's say something bluish. And now when it's compiled, saved, actually you can see that we got gradient. Okay, it will take some time. I don't know why that's taking so long. Okay, I don't know what took it so long, but anyways, you can see that we got that gradient. So we can actually, and the base parameter is also called base color, so we will leave it like that. You can change it to gradient color maybe. Yeah, we can change it to so gradient color. Okay, so let's save this. And when we go back to our stack spawner, we'll go to event graph, and we will create new variable which will be previous color. Okay, and it will be of a vector. Let's compile and save. And before this is spawning, so before spawn we will see what is the previous color. So we will set that previous color, and we will use our function which is getColor. Okay, so it gives us color before it changes, it later changes, and we will use it to change our background. And now let's create the last thing, and that is the new custom event. So custom event, and we will call it change background color. Okay, you can separate this, but doesn't matter. So we will change, and we will use timeline. Add timeline. Okay, so we will add, and we will say place from start. It will play always from start. And we will say flow track from 0, add key, time 0, value 0 to 1. So time we'll say 1 and value 1. Let's say time to 2. It takes more time, so use last keyframe. Last keyframe will actually be 2, so not this length. Okay, let's compile, save, and let's go back to event graph. Okay, so what we're gonna update is our color. So we'll say vector on material plane. Yeah, that's right. Okay, and we will gradient color. So what we're gonna update with timeline, we will update lerp. So lerp vector, okay. And this will be our time, actually our track, and from previous to current color. So it will change color gradually over time. So we don't have constant. We don't have automatically changed background, but like over time changed. Okay, so this is done, and we need to set this to be just see here. Oh yeah, before it starts moving. So change background color. So it spawned, create a new color, and gradually change that color. Okay, let's see what we got. Oh yeah, I forgot to do something, and that is to change material to this one. Okay, so let's compile, save. So you can see that it's changing. Just to see. Oh yeah, it's changing. Okay, but something's not right. And the thing that's not right, it's actually, so when we go here, it takes too long time, so we'll say 0.5. Okay, compile and save, and let's see now how it's working. Yeah, it's all working fine. And that's pretty much it from this tutorial. We only need to fix some things. You can actually play with this gradient. I don't know if it's the same as I made in the original, but you can play with it a little bit more. As for our button, we can go to our buttons, and let's take this button and let's set it something like position 0, 0. Okay, so size, anchor, we can set it something like this, and we can scale it all across the screen. And also you can say style normal to actually be invisible. Why invisible? Because it will be actually invisible button. So in this case we will say, tint to be invisible. Okay, so also you can say for that is normal, hovered, pressed. So this was for pressed. We can change something. Also alpha, so 0, and hover also. Okay, let's compile and save, and let's go back to our game. So whenever we clicked anywhere on screen, we can actually do what we want. Now all that's left is actually to set this to be invisible, and also you can create something like collider, which will actually destroy every those remaining tiles, so you don't have bunch of tiles, not to waste memory. And also you can make some array with other tiles which are invisible to be like destroyed also. It's all something you should work for your game. And also one thing I should mention, you should create a start menu, but this was actually how to create that gameplay. If you, of course, that every game needs a little bit more work than this, but this is a basic stuff, and in future I'll create more of these tutorials. And if you like it, please leave like and subscribe. That's it, all from me. Bye.